What is plagiarism, and how can you avoid it? By the end of this video, you will have learned what plagiarism is, the dangers of failing to cite sources, the different citation styles, how to properly cite a source, and how to find resources for proper citations. So let's start by asking ourselves, what is plagiarism? Let's look at a few examples. If you created an invention that made millions of dollars, would you want to have it patented so that you were the one who received credit and money for this invention? If you directed a movie that not only made millions of dollars, but also won an Oscar, would you want your name in the credits so that you are the one who receives the money, fame, and recognition? Or what about if you took weeks, or even years, to write and publish a book, a poem, or an essay? Would you want your name on it so that you would be recognized for your intelligence and hard work? So if you answered yes to those questions, then you understand the need for citations in order to avoid plagiarism. So now let's talk about intellectual property. What is it? In a basic sense, intellectual property states that a person's ideas and words are owned by that person. Written texts and the original ideas within them are considered to be intellectual property according to Diana Hacker, author of A Writer's Reference. So if you want to use an author's intellectual property, you must follow certain conventions, because failing to do so would be stealing their property. Not only is this an ethical offense, but also it is a legal offense according to copyright law. So again, what is the definition of plagiarism? When you use another author's intellectual property language, visuals, or ideas in your own writing without giving proper credit, you commit a kind of academic theft called plagiarism, explains Hacker on page 347 of her book. All of the following are examples of plagiarism: turning in someone else's work as your own, copying words or ideas from someone else without giving them credit, failing to put a quote or borrowed words inside quotation marks, giving incorrect information about the source of a quotation, aiding, even indirectly, in an act of plagiarism, for example, by providing old reports, assignments, or exams to a classmate, changing words but copying the sentence structure of a source without giving credit, for example, only changing a word or two, copying so many words or ideas from a source that it makes up the majority of your work, whether you give credit or not, using someone else's algorithms, such as Excel tables, formulas, or even computer codes as your own, having on you unauthorized materials during an exam, even if it's not used. Now let's look at the basics of how you can avoid plagiarism using citations. What does it mean to cite information? Citing your sources not only allows you to avoid plagiarism and other serious offenses like copyright infringement, but also providing citations strengthens your writing, as it proves that you have done research on the topic. A citation is a way to tell a reader of your work that certain words and ideas came from another source other than your own brain. Citations consist of two parts: an in-text citation and a reference list, which is sometimes called a works cited page or a bibliography. The in-text citation tells your reader which words or ideas in your work came from another source, whereas the reference list gives your readers the necessary information to find that source again, if need be. Before we get into more detail, it's also important to mention that there are three citation styles that are most commonly used in academia: MLA, APA, or Chicago. A citation style dictates how you will make reference to a source that you are using. Regardless of which citation style you use, the two parts mentioned above, which are in-text citations and a reference list, are applicable to all styles of citation. With that being said, the reference list, which usually appears on the last page of your work, must include such information about your sources as the last name of the authors, the year in which the works were published, the titles of the works, and the names and locations of the companies that published the works. Here's an example of a reference list citation in APA styling. Now let's talk about in-text citations. The in-text citation must include information such as the year in which the source was published and the page number of the words you are making reference to. Or, depending on the citation style, you may need the author's last name. It's very important to note that the way in which you will present the citations in your work will differ greatly depending on the citation style you are using. For example, Chicago uses footnotes as in-text citation. MLA asks you to provide a page number, whereas APA asks you to mention the author's last name and the year of publication. Another note to consider is that your sources may come from many different media, such as physical research papers, electronic books, a YouTube video, or even a tweet. Depending on the type of media you got your information from, the in-text citation and reference list will have to be adjusted accordingly. This is why it's always important to use a reference guide, such as an online library or a writing lab, to ensure that you are properly styling those citations in your academic work. One of the standard guides for citation formatting and styling is the Online Writing Lab by Purdue University, commonly known as the OWL at Purdue. Most students enjoy this website because of its thorough overview of the various citation styles, as well as the examples that it offers. The easiest way to access this website is to go to Google and Google OWL at Purdue. So remember, you commit plagiarism when you fail to cite quotations and/or ideas, when you fail to use quotation marks around another author's words, phrases, or sentences, or when you fail to summarize or paraphrase in your own words. In this next part of our video on avoiding plagiarism, we will break down a few key ideas, namely citing quotations and borrowed ideas, when to use quotation marks, and summaries versus paraphrasing. So remember, plagiarism is not just about stealing someone's words, but also their ideas. For example, you may listen to an interview with Barack Obama and find that you want to use some of his ideas in a paper that you're writing. Even though Obama's words were spoken and not written, you must still give him credit in your paper because you are using his ideas. However, if Obama was reading a speech, you would give credit to the speechwriter, not to Obama. So for the example of the video where you watched an interview with Barack Obama and would like to make reference to his ideas, you must give credit to Obama both in text and also in your reference list. And again, as we saw in the previous video, the way in which you will give Mr. Obama credit in your work will depend on the citation style. Now let's look at when to use quotation marks. You are, of course, allowed to use someone else's ideas in your academic work. However, you are only allowed to use them if you give credit to that person. There are two types of quotations found in academic writing: a direct quotation and an indirect quotation. A direct quotation presents an author's exact words, whereas an indirect quotation presents an author's idea. However, when indirectly quoting, students often make the mistake of paraphrasing, which is the use of someone else's words or ideas reconstructed to look like your own. Students assume they no longer have to cite their source because the sentence has been changed. In the case of a direct quotation, even if you have cited the source, you still commit plagiarism if you don't use quotation marks. Let's look at a few examples. The original wording that this student used was extracted from a book written by author Sarah Williams Goldhagen. The author writes, "Yet research clearly demonstrates that design is central to effective learning environments." Now this is how the student phrased it in her assignment. Research has demonstrated that design is central to better learning outcomes. Notice that the student copied words and phrases from the original work without giving credit to the author. The student rearranged some of the words, but this sentence still uses the basic wording and structure of the original work. Yet the student used the idea as if it were her own. This is plagiarism. Let's look at another example. The original wording that this student used for his assignment was the same as before. Yet, research clearly demonstrates that the design is central to effective learning environments. Then the student wrote the following in his assignment. Williams Goldhagen explains that research clearly demonstrates that design is central to effective learning environments. Less obviously, although the student did give credit to the author of the words that he is borrowing, he presented the author's exact words as if he, the student, authored them without using quotation marks. Again, when you are using exact words, you must put them in between quotation marks to indicate that you are using a direct quotation. Now let's talk about summaries and paraphrasing. When you reduce or condense information, you are summarizing. However, when you repeat information in your own words in about the same number of words as the author's, you are paraphrasing. According to Hacker on page 360, you commit plagiarism if you half copy the author's sentence, either by mixing the author's phrases with your own without using quotation marks, or by plugging different synonyms into the author's sentence structure. A great thought to always keep in mind throughout your studies is, when in doubt, cite your source of information. In fact, the only time you don't have to cite your sources is if the information is considered common knowledge. You don't have to cite common knowledge. However, since you don't have to cite common knowledge, many students make the mistake of accidentally plagiarizing. So here's a tip. Look around your class. If you think that most of your classmates don't know something, then cite your information. Another tip is that if you find information repeatedly in your research, it does not need to be cited. For example, if you were doing research and read the sentence, Emily Dickinson only published a handful of poems during her lifetime, this would not need to be cited as it contains common knowledge about Emily Dickinson. However, the sentence Dickinson wrote over 1,500 poems in and tied them together into 43 separate collections called fascicles, which she placed into her bureau drawer for posterity to find. This would need to be cited because it contains factual information. Therefore, you would need to tell your reader where you got this information from. This image demonstrates the correct use of in-text citations and the works cited page using the APA citation style. Notice the styling between the direct quotation and the paraphrased sentences. Another tip for avoiding plagiarism is the 3-word rule, which states if you copy more than 3 words verbatim, which means word for word, from a source, you must use quotation marks around these words and immediately reference the source using in-text citations. When you're taking notes, follow these steps. Read the information a couple of times and then take notes in your own words without looking at your source. However, if you want to quote an author, be sure to use quotation marks around an author's exact words. Let's look at a few more examples of plagiarism that might be found in various disciplines. Using someone else's table format, formula, and graphs as your own is plagiarism. Media plagiarism. The most common form of plagiarism today can be found in social media posts and advertising outlets. People tend to forget to give credit to photographers, illustrators, and digital content creators. There are many tools on the internet today that make citing your sources in any style much easier, such as easybib.com, or the majority of the time you'll be able to find a small button on web pages that asks if you want to cite this text. Lastly, it is crucial that you be aware of the sources for your information. Wikipedia is not a valid source, as it does not contain an author, nor a date of publication. However, Wikipedia may be used as a starting point for your research, namely the references section of a Wikipedia page. To summarize, there is no quick or easy way around writing a good assignment. Plagiarism policies have such harsh consequences because the ultimate goal of learning is to get you, a student, to have your own thoughts and ideas. Take the time, do proper research, and you will succeed. Thanks for listening, and good luck with your writing.